Hi, everybody, and welcome to Attendance Bias. I am your host, Brian Weinstein. Before we get started with today's episode, I want to remind everybody that you can support Attendance Bias. You can rate and review the show wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow Attendance Bias on social media, and you can visit www.buymeacoffee.com/attendancebias and donate anything you can. Now, on to the show. Today, we continue our mini-series of previewing each venue on Phish's 2026 summer tour with a peek at, quote, Coastal Credit Union Music Park at Walnut Creek, or, for the purposes of today's episode, simply Walnut Creek. We are firmly in the Thunderstorms with 110% humidity leg of this summer tour. The last venue was Enmarket Arena in Savannah, Georgia. This week we are in Raleigh, North Carolina for Walnut Creek, and next up will be Merriweather Post in Maryland. Bring some change of underwear. Although there are some quirks to this summer tour, Walnut Creek is a well-established venue for Phish fans going all the way back to 1994. In fact, with just maybe 2 or 3 exceptions, Phish's history in Raleigh is their history at Walnut Creek, which makes this a very exciting stop on the tour and for me a very exciting episode. Our tour guide today is Bryan Rodgers, a longtime Phish fan who has lived in and around the Raleigh-Durham area for nearly all of his life. Bryan not only tells us about the literal geography of Raleigh, but explains the recent history of Raleigh, where and how the jamband scene fits in over the past 30 years, active venues, venues long gone, and the best places to get North Carolina Raleigh-style barbecue. In addition, Bryan and I review Phish's history in the city and at Walnut Creek. I'll be honest, there are a lot more music clips in today's episode than there usually are in the venue previews. Walnut Creek simply deserves it and demands it. Whether it's jamming during a thunderstorm or a mashup between Runaway Jim and Run Like an Antelope, Bryan has us covered the whole way. So let's get right to it as we prepare for Phish's show at Walnut Creek on July 17th, 2026. Bryan, welcome to Attendance Bias. How are you?
I'm great, man. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I'm excited to hear about Walnut Creek today. Coastal Credit Union Music Park at Walnut Creek. This is becoming a trend this year as Phish is revisiting so many classic venues. All the venues that I just know by 2 words or 3, like Merriweather Post or Walnut Creek. Now I got to remember an entire corporate naming rights before we get there. So for today, between you and I, Bryan, it's just going to be Walnut Creek.
That's good. That's what it is to all of us who have lived here for more than a decade or so. It's just like deer. You can call it, you can put whatever Verizon or Alltel or Hardee's or Time Warner or Coastal Federal Credit Union. It's always just Walnut Creek.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one for me, I grew up on Long Island, so for me, it's Jones Beach. So I remember the first time I understood naming rights, it was like Tommy Hilfiger Theater at Jones Beach. And I'm like, I was like 14, and I'm like, that's strange. That doesn't really, and then it was like Canon or Kodak, I can't remember. And
Nikon, right?
That's right. Yes, and it was a camera company. So I lost track of it before I didn't grow up in that world. So to me, it's just Jones Beach, it's just Great Woods, it's just Walnut Creek. So Phish is coming there July 17th, this coming summer. And interestingly, I don't know what the plan, how this happens, but it's one of only 2 nights that the band is only playing one night at the venue. The other one is Lakeview, which is in Syracuse. Everywhere else, except Walnut Creek in Raleigh, North Carolina, and Lakeview in Syracuse, every other venue is hosting Phish for multiple nights. What did you guys do wrong? Did you piss them off?
They've never done it here for whatever reason. I don't think there's ever been a 2-night stand in North Carolina. Maybe it's because of the Hampton thing. You know, we're really close to Hampton, and that's always a 2 or 3 or 4 night thing. But yeah, no Charlotte, no Raleigh. Actually, there was a 2-night stand in Wilmington a couple years ago, or a few years ago, that went disastrously. One night got shortened by thunderstorms, and then if you look at the Fishnet reviews or whatever, the whole thing just did not go over very well. But 2 nights of Phish is 2 nights of Phish.
Right, right. And you know what? Maybe because of that one night, be satisfied. We'll take what we can get.
Right.
So, Brian, before we dig too deep into this upcoming show, let's hear a little bit about you. What is your history in the Raleigh area? Like, how close or far are you from the actual venue? Do you live in Raleigh? Tell us a little bit of background.
So I was born and raised in Wilson, North Carolina, which is about half an hour east of Raleigh. So when Walnut Creek was built in 91, I was 15 years old, barely old enough to even drive to a show. But my first real concert ever was at Walnut Creek. My dad came with me. I had my learner's permit. It was Little Feat and George Thorogood, actually.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's a good show.
And it was a fun time. I had never seen anything like that Little Feat crowd. It had that a deadhead-ish, that dedicated nucleus sort of thing going on. And at 15 years old, I'd never heard of anything like that. So that was a huge moment. And I got hooked and immediately started going back. I went to college in Greenville, which is about an hour east of Raleigh. Still no major venues down there. So we found ourselves at Walnut Creek all the time. And then eventually through work and other things, I wound up moving up to the Raleigh-Durham greater area. I think other than Phish, I've seen about 55 shows at Walnut Creek. So if you throw the Phish ones in there, which isn't all of them, it takes me over 60. So I've spent a lot of time at that place.
Yeah, we got the right guy here. That's great. When I was, I keep thinking of Jones Beach as you talk about Walnut Creek. It's kind of the same thing. I have a similar story. When I was, I think, 14, I might have been a year younger than you. My dad took me. It wasn't my first concert necessarily, but the first concert I remember really going to at Jones Beach, my dad took me to see Emerson, Lake and Palmer open for Jethro Tull. And that was a good
Wow.
show. That was a good
So
show.
many notes. So many notes.
Right? So, yeah, no kidding. A lot of notes. Whether you're talking about Ian Anderson or I don't know, it doesn't matter. Like it was a long and note-filled concert. You're absolutely right. And I remember he invited some of his friends. My dad must have been around 50 at the time, maybe in his mid 40s, and which is where I am now. And as we were walking out, I remember his friend Charlie leaned over to me and he goes, "So, did you know what weed smelled like before this show?" And my dad was turning red. He like couldn't believe his friend was asking his little kid this question. And I said, I'll never forget. I said back to Charlie, "I went to go see Dave Matthews Band earlier this year. I know what weed smells like." And but that's how I see Walnut Creek. It's kind of like the analog, like it's to kind of like the I-95 corridor, even though it's in the south, Walnut Creek is. It's obviously a favorite of Phish, but I've always seen it as kind of starting the I-95 route up through like Merriweather Post, Philadelphia, Jones Beach, Great Woods, that Walnut Creek is in that circuit. Like that we would all gather in, like you mentioned 1991 earlier when it was built, that we would all gather at a local drugstore called Pathmark near my house when they would release the Jones Beach schedule. And then you get in line for Ticketmaster, right, in person,
Oh, yes.
obviously. Is Walnut Creek that venue for your area, like the Summer Shed?
Absolutely. Raleigh is the capital city, but North Carolina was sort of hurting for anything like that when Walnut Creek was built. Obviously, the Dead played a famous show at the NC State football stadium, Carter Finley, and Charlotte Coliseum had its moments and everything. But the first real amphitheater around here was Walnut Creek. And like you said, they made a habit of it. I can't even count I can count them, but the East Coast runs: Virginia Beach, Raleigh, Charlotte.
Right.
Charlotte, Raleigh, Merriweather, Atlanta, Charlotte, Raleigh. It definitely is like exactly like you said, like well positioned to be part of that whole setup.
Do you think that there's anything about Walnut Creek that is unique compared to other summer sheds? Like if you went to Great Woods completely blindfolded and we took the blindfold off, or you went to Merriweather Post in the same way, and then you went to Walnut Creek, is there anything distinguishing about it compared to any other generic shed in that circuit?
Probably not to most. To me, I would have no problem saying that's Walnut Creek if I saw a shot from the lawn, a photo from the lawn or something like that, just because I've been there so many times. But I always tell people, people kind of associate these amphitheaters, and rightly so. It kind of represents like a evil empire type thing, especially once the naming convention started with the Verizon Wireless and all that stuff. And people hate the traffic and the prices and all your normal amphitheater complaints. Having been on Phish tour a few times and been to a ton of these similar places, I personally think we're really lucky to have somewhere like Walnut Creek. The sound to me is a notch above, especially on the lawn, is a notch above most of these other amphitheaters. Aesthetically, it's not as like there is nothing remarkable about the Charlotte's amphitheater, right? Whereas, or like Lakewood or something like, Merriweather is kind of a different thing. That's an older place. There's a lot of unique stuff around there. To me, the area around Walnut Creek is a little more wooded, swampy. You get that down east North Carolina feeling, especially on a 105-degree heat index day or whatever.
Yeah, with 110% humidity, right?
Right. Yeah. And moisture rising from the ground probably too. But yeah, to me, and I'm obviously very biased, I've always thought it was a cut above the sort of cookie cutter places.
And that's why I have you here. I'm so thrilled that you are here because you have that bias. That's the name of my show. It's attendance bias, right? I want people who think that their show is better than other people's shows. Like, that's why you're here, to show off Walnut Creek a little bit. And if not Walnut Creek itself, I have never been. I've driven through North Carolina, I could say that, but unfortunately, I've never stopped to look around or to go anywhere within the state, really, at least that I could remember. For any fans who are coming to this show but have never been to Walnut Creek, I know off mic you told me that the literal area around the venue is nothing special. Like, it's just surrounded by like softball fields or residential areas. What if there are people who are staying in Raleigh itself, like the city, downtown Raleigh? What would you recommend? Put it this way: if you had a friend coming into town and you had an extra day with that person, where would you take them? What would you show them?
As far as imbibing goes, with beer and food, and downtown Raleigh has just boomed recently. Some of this stuff is, my entire office here, we're all from around here, live right here, and we can't even keep up with all of the options these days. It used to be much smaller, much sleepier. I would probably, if I was going to pre-show, head out and go somewhere before the show at downtown. The Transfer Company Food Hall, Burial Beer Company is attached to it, which is easily one of the best breweries in North Carolina, if not the country. And then with the food hall, you've got a lot of different options there. Some of them locally sourced, some of them are small chains. There's music venues down there that are kind of forming a little nexus of walking, with a lot of great food options. Poorhouse Music Hall and the Lincoln Theater. I haven't actually looked. They're probably doing some sort of after show, after the Raleigh show or something like that. But yeah, I would just open a Google map and find something they're in the mood for, and it's here. There's there's dive stuff, there's upscale stuff, and every version of food you can think of, there's some sort of different variation in there. Old school hot dog joints all the way up to high-end Asian fusion. Not to harp too much on the beer thing. That's just a big thing to me. You can't walk more than a block or two in Raleigh without finding something delightful on that front. And probably with food, probably with food attached or nearby as well.
What was the name of the brewery that you mentioned earlier that you said is most likely one of the best in North Carolina and possibly the country?
Burial.
Okay.
Burial. Yep.
Because I have a feeling a lot of fans, some of whom are listening to this, who are going to the Walnut Creek show, they're going to want to check that out if they haven't been to Raleigh or are unfamiliar with Raleigh, at least. That's where I'd be. You'd find me at the old school hot dog joint and at Burial. That's where you'd find it. Let me ask you though, when my wife and I go traveling, whether it's to an American city or elsewhere internationally, we always want to find the most like hyper local type of food or cuisine. Is there a type of food or a dish that you could find in Raleigh or let's say North Carolina at large that is especially local toward North Carolina or that you can't find a good version of it, outside of Raleigh? Like, is there something you would say this represents our area?
For sure. I would say probably the Eastern North Carolina barbecue style. And I've been all over the Eastern Seaboard and everything and tried different kinds of barbecue. And there is nothing quite like that exact combination of whole hog barbecue. You know, the whole pig is smoked, and then there's a vinegar and red pepper based sauce that goes on most of it. And I mean, once you get out of Eastern North Carolina, or even slightly west of Raleigh, you don't see that exact thing. It's like you cannot. People have tried, but you cannot quite recreate whatever it is down here that makes that stuff taste exactly the way it does.
You're making my stomach grumble a little bit just when you said the red pepper and vinegar mix.
Oh
Do
man,
you want to give a
some
shout
people
out?
are like, "What?" Yeah, Sam Jones barbecue is what I would say in Raleigh gets the closest to what I grew up with, which is farther eastern. Wilson, the town I'm from, is was known at one point as just the barbecue capital. Few restaurants just perfected that style, and you know, as times change and places close down and people pass away and everything, you know, a lot of this stuff kind of disappears. But right here in Raleigh, Sam Jones has, you know, it reminds me of my childhood when I go to that place and have the barbecue for sure.
So let's take a look at the venue history of Walnut Creek. It opened on July 4th. So, wave your flag. July 4th, 1991. It has a capacity of 20,000. When you mentioned that the sound is very good, and then you kind of doubled down and you said the sound is good, especially on the lawn, that really surprised me because this sounds like an enormous amphitheater. Like the seated capacity, according to its website, is 6,847. So that's roughly 14, or I would say, let's round it, 13,000 people could fit on that lawn. Like, I'm surprised to hear you say that the sound is good. I'm sure it can't be good every single place on the lawn, but what's your usual spot in the lawn if you have to get lawn tickets? Where do you like to go?
I usually gravitate page side always. It doesn't matter what venue I'm in. That's just how my brain is is wired after years and years of page side. But the left side over there, it sounds fine, and it's almost stunning actually when you do walk back toward the center of the lawn. I'm always kind of blown away by how loud it is, not in an unpleasant way, but how present it is, you know, because like you said, you just don't expect that sort of thing from a massive lawn like that. I've not encountered anywhere else that hits you quite as hard personally. Top of the lawn, wonderful vantage point, and the sound is still fantastic up there somehow. As long as you're not surrounded by a bunch of talking people or whatever, which is always something to consider. Every time I go there, I'm like, this is just this lawn here sounds better than just about anywhere I've ever been before.
You're giving it a good sell. I have to be honest. Well, I mean, I've been
I
on good
hope they don't
lawns
let me
too.
down.
Yeah, no kidding, right? Now they got to show up. The pressure's on. Like to me, the best lawn. I've gone to two venues, like two amphitheater style venues that have great lawns. One was Merriweather Post. I thought had amazing sound, and then the other one, I don't know if I should even count this, is the Ascend Amphitheater in Nashville because it's so small. It is seated and then lawn, but the lawn is like right next to the seats. So to me, it doesn't
Hmm.
have, it's a different scale of a venue. So I'm glad to hear that Walnut Creek is so good in terms of sound. Maybe that's why the band likes to come back there. We're going to get into their shows in just a minute. But I looked over, other than being named, as you referenced, the Hardy's Walnut Creek Amphitheater when it first opened from 1991 to 98, and then selling and sponsor rights kind of went crazy. But after looking over that, there wasn't much about it, about the history of the venue itself. Although North Carolina's tourism board is very proud of it, and it states, this is a quote from the North Carolina tourism website, quote, any major act that has had a tour in the last 20 years has performed here. So they're like, if you're coming through North Carolina, or at least Raleigh, you're coming through Walnut Creek. The site went on to list about 50 well-known artists to back up their claim. And the site, although might be out of date, correct me if I'm wrong, because it lists a $20 charge for premier parking. I'm from New York, so I don't think anything costs $20 anymore. As of your best memory, your most recent experience, someone going, do you think they're going to have to pay more than $20 for parking?
This has been a big topic of conversation around my office because we're in music merchandise and we're all huge music fans. And for the first time ever, general parking at Walnut Creek is going to cost this year. It's always been free. Like you said, premier parking, that's all obviously always been an upcharge. And I believe it was 50 for regular premier last year. And then you could pay a little bit more, like 75 or 80. And they have like a fast exit parking lot where they route you past the traffic at the end of the show or whatever. But yeah, back in maybe January or so, right when things started getting announced, they announced that prepaid parking is going to be for everyone that goes there, which is a mind-blowing thing to me because just the logistical process of making sure that every car that comes up there has paid for parking is it's going to make everything way slower and different. Whereas if you didn't pay for Premier, you used to just drive in. There was nothing to worry about otherwise. And that was one of the things that made that place so great, especially compared to, the hockey arena that we have here can skyrocket up to 40 to 50 bucks a car. And that's not even close to the arena. So yeah, the parking is included in the ticket fee thing. Was always something great about Walnut Creek that unfortunately this year is gone.
I remember Jones Beach used to be that way as well because it's on a state park. The only time that they would charge you for parking was if you were going there on a holiday, on a federal holiday. So, like, Phish played there once. I think it was in 2012. They played on July 4th. So you had to pay. It was something cheap. It was like 15 or 20 bucks for parking at Jones Beach. Otherwise, it was free. I haven't been to a show at Jones Beach in about 6 years, maybe seven, because 6 years ago there were no shows at Jones Beach. It was 2020. So I'll have to get back to you on that one. Other than your Little Feet show that you went to go see, any other great memories of seeing shows at Walnut Creek? Let's put Phish aside because they're going to get their own little segment. But any other
Right.
shows about Walnut Creek that stand out to you in your mind?
So many, especially in those earlier days, the high school days. I immediately went back a week or so after my first show, went back for Steve Miller Band. These are things that when you're that age, you never forget, and especially with no cameras everywhere and phones and everything was kind of an adventure. I mean, in 1991 and 1992, like you said, just buying tickets was a whole process.
Right.
Just getting there was a whole process. Figuring anything out. I saw Dave Matthews Band there in '94, which was super memorable. And everybody from in my high school years, Janet Jackson played there. Unbelievable memory. Live, the band Live.
Sure.
Not sure if you're familiar with them or not.
Oh, yeah.
That was super. That was at their absolute peak, when that album was massive. So I'll never forget that. And then, yeah, it's just spiraled from there. And obviously, Phish came into my life in like 95, 96, and all those shows. So that along with that came a bunch of Panic shows there. And Panic would frequently play two-night stands there. And then even like Pearl Jam in '98, just endless. Allman Brothers, several legendary Allman Brothers shows with just about every different lineup they've had over the years there. I wrote down a few other ones. Obviously Jimmy Buffett. Where hasn't he played? Farm Aid was there. No, that was more like the late 2010s, I believe, or early 2010s. But yeah, just the Chamber of Commerce thing you read earlier. That might be over exaggerating a little bit to say any touring band has had a major tour has played there, but it was the only. It was that if you wanted to hit that region, it was the only option for a while because Virginia Beach, that's a long way from Raleigh. Charlotte is its own thing. Richmond doesn't have a big amphitheater like that. Yeah, it's almost endless. And I did spend a few hours going back through setlist.fm and kind of surprised myself a little bit with some of the stuff I saw there that it's just a special place.
I do the same thing all the time when I think back to that time I mean, I'm a little bit younger than you, not by much, and I went to concerts at a fairly young age. I used to have my parents drop me off at Jones Beach and then pick me up after the show was over. They're thinking back now, how generous they were with their time and how much trust they must have put in me, to go see the Allman Brothers when I'm like 14 or 13 and I couldn't drive and who knows what I'm bumping into, right? Amongst that crowd. But I would see all those shows when you mentioned Steve Miller Band. It's the same lineup as Jones Beach when we would get that physical calendar or on the back of the newspaper they would print, and it would be a calendar with all the different bands playing which date. I would see all those shows too, and it's so much fun. Not that there aren't other I mean, for Long Island at least, there's the Nassau Coliseum is not that far. It's the same capacity, maybe even a little smaller than Jones Beach, but that summer feeling of going to an outdoor show, there's nothing better than it, except for when, of course, there's a big thunderstorm that delays the show.
Yeah, I mean, and not only were tickets and everything else way more affordable back then, but like I said, all you had to do was go to the place. If you had a ticket, you were good. You didn't technically have to spend another dime, and so it became like it's out from Raleigh proper. It's surrounded by schools and strip malls and apartment complexes and stuff like that. But I mean, it did kind of become like the back porch for everybody who just loves music in general around here for a long time.
So geographically, I'm getting the sense that if you're going to go to a show at Walnut Creek, you need to drive. Am I wrong on that? Is there public transport that can get you there? Let me ask you this. Where do you think most people from out of town would be staying? Are they staying in Raleigh and then finding a way to get to Walnut Creek? What do you think?
There are hotel options scattered around that. So Walnut Creek is southeast of Raleigh proper. And then once you get past that area, then you're into true Eastern North Carolina with the rolling fields and hog farms and so but the infrastructure has changed so much. I mean, I've always been a tailgating drive myself kind of guy, so I've never had to deal with lodging for that, but there's probably just about every option you can think of within 15-20 minutes of the venue, and that includes even if you stay downtown, you're really not that far away. The Uber thing, at any show that size, it can be a total chaos.
Right.
Trying to get out of there, especially. So I don't envy that situation, but I would assume at this point, all of the towns that have sprouted up and everything that has grown around there, that there's plenty of options from the lowest motel up to the highest, like downtown, sort of boutique thing in Raleigh proper.
Well, speaking of Raleigh proper, is there much of a jam band scene or a Phish scene or a crowd in Raleigh that you're aware of?
There is. It's a good preface is to say that I used to work for an organization called the Homegrown Music Network. We would find independent, mostly jam bands. We would distribute their CDs because it was CDs back then, promote their shows, which, as growing up in that time, it wasn't just right in front of your face like
Right.
everything is now. So between that, the founder of that company, he sort of put North Carolina on everyone's map and that was happening mostly in Greenville, but started to go over toward Raleigh, whereas downtown Raleigh, nobody used to live down there in the 90s. In the mid 90s, they rolled the freaking streets up at night, and nothing happened in downtown Raleigh at all. It was absolutely insane. But then the Poorhouse opened in 1997, and their booking guy, Chris Malarkey, who still books at the Lincoln Theater here in Raleigh, he really made a huge difference. I mean, some of the times that I would even find a reason to go to Raleigh at all was all because he had the Big Woo or somebody like that at the Poorhouse. So a scene grew from that and has continued on to the Lincoln. And, they have a lot of street shows now. Government Mule has had huge shows here. Disco Biscuits keep coming back to the Lincoln, even though it's a little bit too small for them at this point. Humphreys McGee's first trip down here, it really does have a solid scene. I don't know what really to compare it to. Obviously, it's not like the Northeast that was just completely saturated with every sort of jam thing you can imagine. But we've held our own over the past 30 years or so, that's for sure. There was a few years there where, and everybody can probably relate to this, where Phish shows, maybe like 98, 99, even though we consider those some of the peak years, the shows weren't crazy. You could get in the back of the seats at an amphitheater, and you might have the whole damn road to yourself. That all changed, I think, for good when they came back from the first hiatus and played Greensboro Coliseum, which is one of the biggest indoor arenas in the country still, I believe, 23,000, 24,000, something like that. Ever since then, the South has, especially around here, there's not been any sort of lackluster attendance at a Phish show or anything like that.
And that was a good show, right? It was March 1st.
Greensboro. Oh, that show was insane. So good.
Hi, everybody. Brian here to welcome you to the set break of today's episode of Attendance Bias. First, thank you for listening. And second, just a quick reminder to tell you that even though Attendance Bias comes to you for free, it does take a lot of work and it does take quite a bit of money to keep the lights on here at production. So I just wanted to ask a small favor. If you could support the podcast in any number of the following ways. If you could leave a review or a rating of it on whichever podcast app you use. If you could spread the word, telling a friend or someone you think may be interested in it about it. Or probably the most concrete way is to go to www.buymeacoffee.com/attendancebias and donate however much you can financially to help with the continuing costs of Attendance Bias. So thank you again so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the second half of today's episode. Let's dig a little deeper into Phish's history. So the majority of Phish's history in Raleigh is their history at Walnut Creek, but they have played other venues in the city all the way back in 1990. The date I have is May 24th, 1990. They played at a small club. The capacity listed was only 300 people, called the Brewery. And this was way back in the time when they were still playing jazz standards. Tweezer was being introduced as Tweezer So Cold by Fishman. This was the first known live performance of horn.
On all the buildings of the town. scribble my possessions in a ring around the earth, and bought and sold my self-control for less than it was worth. Now I know the reason that I'm feeling so forlorn. I'll pick you up at 8 as usual. Listen for my horn.
So they were still developing, but they were well on their way to becoming a professional band. And for what it's worth, I looked it up, did a little bit more research. I love this stuff. So I had to know the brewery was in business from 1983 to 2011. And it's hosted, you want to talk about the Chamber of Commerce. When I looked up the bands that have played the brewery, super successful bands.
That place is no longer there. It's been replaced, as so many things have, by storefronts on the first floor, apartments up top. But, you know, just for example, I did see the Disco Biscuits there in 1999 with maybe 7 other people, not including the bartender and whatever entourage they had, you know, with them at the time, which wasn't much. And I think Panic played there in the early 90s. You know, when I said there wasn't much happening in downtown Raleigh in the early 90s, the brewery was more on the other side of North Carolina State University and tucked right there by campus. So it was a completely different vibe than, say, where the poorhouse in the Lincoln is now. And that place, I mean, they really are one of the, like, you can't talk about Raleigh historically, musically, without talking about the brewery. That's for sure.
Phish played there. They made their Raleigh debut there on May 24th, 1990. And just 4 years later, from this 300-person capacity club/bar, 4 years later, they would play Walnut Creek. The first of, to date, as of today, you and I are speaking, 11 shows that they played at Walnut Creek. Well, first, when was your first Phish show?
Hampton, 96, so October 25th, 96.
All right, so you missed them at Walnut Creek just by a hair. Their first the first show there was...
The first 2 Walnut Creek shows.
Right. The first show there was June 29th, 94, and then their next show after that, again in June 16th, 95.
Carolina, 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 Carolina. Nothing's harder in the morning. Nothing's sweeter in the morning. When the morning glory twine around the door, whispering pretty stories I long to hear once more, once more. Strolling early in the morning, butterflies a flutter up in case it's not got the dawning. If I had a lion's lamp, I'd make a wish, and here's what I'd say: nothing could be finer than to be in Carolina in the morning.
But the one that I think most people know about, when people hear Walnut Creek, and tell me if you agree or disagree. When most fans, maybe outside of Raleigh or outside of North Carolina, even, and they hear these shows or these venues, I should say, and they associate them with certain shows. So when I hear Walnut Creek, I automatically think of July 22nd, 1997. The
Absolutely.
show
So do
famously
I.
they jammed, right? They jammed along with the thunderstorm, with the massive thunderstorm that closed or maybe during the first set, and they famously jammed. I put the word jammed in quotes because how do you jam to the weather? But they did uh, during Taste, especially, and it was released on DVD.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of those moments where if you were there, you still tell people the story. I like to say, just to drive the point home, that I was on the lawn and I feared for my life that night. There's no way that a show like that wouldn't be stopped nowadays. I mean, I'm sure as you follow Phish and everything, and lightning clauses now are you can't have a lightning strike within a certain distance of the venue, or they have to evacuate it and all this stuff. That did not exist back then, and it was one of the most terrifying things of my entire concert going career for sure. I'll never forget the look of that sky.
Describe it. Tell us about it.
Uh, I don't beyond black and purple, I guess, is the only way I can describe it. Something, whatever's black, whatever the next step down is. It was, and being from here, growing up in North Carolina, I knew it was going to be bad. The closest of those lightning strikes, which you can hear one on the show they released. You can hear one right before Bye Bye Foot 2, I think, and everybody's screaming. And then obviously there's the big crack that everybody knows about during Taste. And I was on the lawn, which is a sloped surface, and I'm standing in inches of water. I still think about that to this day. Down in the bowl, down in the seats, the water was coming off the roof so fast on the edge that the pit and the soundboard and everything were flooding rapidly. And that's why the end of Taste is so abrupt. They end Taste and Trey Lero says, "We'll be right back." They had to get off. They had to get off of that stage.
Yeah.
There was a moment there where I wasn't sure what was going to happen as far as the second set or whatever. But of course, everybody knows that it turned into a beautiful night, and they came out and absolutely delivered something I still listen to this day, and still gives me chill bumps every time, actually.
Yeah, that version of Weekapaw Groove is not to be trifled with. That is an insane version of that song. I listen to it too all the time.
It's the train. Obviously, anybody who's spent any time listening to Phish beyond a normal amount knows about the transition between Down with Disease and Mike's is just so slow and patient, and you hear it coming a mile away, but you're not sure. And then the crowd starts to lose their minds, and you can hear it on the tape, and you know what's coming. And then even the end of that Mike song gets into this like supernaturally dark, foreboding, which kind of matched the the tornadic storm that we dealt with too. But short show, but I mean, and the first set is what it is, pretty normal. But that last hour of music, I mean, even through the hood and everything is just it's almost indescribable.
But that was far from the last time they would play Walnut Creek. They came back the next year, August 7th, 1998. They took a year off, or at least in the summer they did, because we'll get back to this, but they played in 99 as well. June 25th, 2000. They came back in 2003. I guess they played twice, or at least in Greensboro, not the same exact place. July 27th, 03. That was it for 1 and 2.0. July 1st, 2010, June 18th, 2011, August 14th, 2015, August 10th, 2018, and most recently, July 29th, 2022. The one that I did not mention was when they played Reynolds Coliseum in Raleigh, which was on December 16th, 1999, on their December/winter tour, which is basically a big run-up, like the runway up to Big Cypress. Of all the show dates that I just rattled off, do you have any highlights, any favorites, whether it's a single song or an entire show that stick out in your memory, Bryan?
I mean, just to briefly touch on the Reynolds thing, that was super special to me as a huge basketball fan and somebody who grew up going to games at Reynolds when NC State was still considered, one of the major, when Valvano was there, and they stopped using that arena for men's basketball a while back. But to be able to go back there for Phish was like super special, and super special for anybody from Raleigh. Gosh, I actually didn't go to the 2000 Walnut Creek show because I was at Gathering of the Vibes. I don't know if you know Gathering of the Vibes, the festival. Yeah. So that was a shame to miss, but having listened back to it and heard from friends, I didn't miss a whole lot, which is kind of not, for that time period, not unheard of, leading up to the first hiatus or whatever. The 98 thing, I think people kind of overlook. That had one of the last, or not last, great Forbin Mockingbird narrations, but to me, Forbin Mockingbird became much rarer after that time period. So I felt super lucky to get it at all. And then the narration is like 10 minutes long.
Welcome everybody on this full moon special. Thanks for having us, by the way. Thanks for having us. Happy to be here. Anyway, it's the full moon tonight, and it just so happens that I thought I would tell this story because it was a full moon the night that the person I was just singing about was climbing up the very mountain that I was just singing about. And it reminded me of that since it was a full moon tonight. So anyway, on this particular night, our hero who I was just singing about, Colonel Forbin, was of course climbing up the mountain in Gamehenge there to try to find Icarus and ask him to get the Helping Friendly book. So he was climbing up the mountain anyway, and it was a well-lit night, and what happened on this particular night that was different from other nights when he had climbed the mountain was that he got up to the top and he looked around and he saw, since it was lit up by the full moon, he could see the valley below him, and he's on top of this incredibly huge cliff hanging over this mountain with jagged brown rocks looking down into this valley below and caverns and everything. And he's standing up there on this cliff and he looks down and he sees that way off in the distance, there's this beautiful little pond kind of glistening. It's like a blue pond. And he knows that he's supposed to go up there and try to find Nicholas and all that stuff. But he decides on this particular day that he's got to change his plans. And as he's standing there, he looks up to the right and he sees that somebody has attached a zip line running all the way from the top of this mountain, all the way down and over this beautiful pond. So he's standing there and he thinks, should I go up there and try to do all this stuff, and find Nicholas? And he decides, no, I'm going to grab onto this zip line and go whizzing down, you know, a half a mile from the top of this mountain all the way down and just let go, drop myself into this pond.
You know, it is classic. Like, it sounds like something out of 1994 or 93. You know, Trey just had this whole vision of a story in his head that he had come up with for whatever reason. You know, that night there was a lunar eclipse. So that was part of the inspiration behind it. That for sure is a highlight. The 03 show definitely gets overshadowed by the Charlotte show from that same run, and that show was incredible, but still super fucking good. Seven Below at that show, I would point out as the highlight. Like I said, I listened back to all these shows, and you know, obviously I skipped some of the predictable moments to get to the more interesting stuff. And really, these last two Walnut Creek shows are unbelievable. And
Talking
I
about
don't listen
2018 and 2022.
Yeah, I don't listen to nearly as much Phish as I used to on a regular basis. In the context of the tour, I may not know. They might be pretty normal or whatever, because I wasn't paying quite as much attention. But the 22 show in particular, to me, is just, they're in a goofy mood. There's banter. They're fooling around. You know, you watch or you listen to it, just like in 2018, you can watch the live Phish YouTube stream of that one. There are smiles all around. And it just seems like the last couple of times they've been here, they have really enjoyed it, which isn't always the case. You know, that the 18 show, huge teases everywhere, and the runaway gem antelope makasupa mash thing there's just spectacular. And for the last time they were here, which that doesn't seem like it's been almost 4 years, but here we are. Beautiful second set, patient, noisy, ambient moments of Ruby Waves and Sea of Stars. I think people my age we tend to look back at the older stuff as always going to be better, but I'm not absolutely sure that's the case with Walnut Creek. I mean, there's nothing wrong with like you said, 2010, 2011, 2015 was really interesting and fun as well. But
yeah, that was when they did the Slow Llama, famously or infamously, depending on who you talk to.
super well, yeah, super well played show,
Yeah.
like, but to me, it's 97, and then these next two, I think, would probably be my favorites out of the 8 or whatever it is I've seen there.
Do you have any hopes for this summer? Anything you're looking out for? Anything you're crossing your fingers?
I don't do that so much anymore. I kind of, as long as they're here and still doing it, I'm kind of cool with whatever. Obviously, there's some stuff I prefer. I really like the long meandering jams, which in '95 was the Runaway Gym. That was like one of the first half-hour long jams they ever did. And they just have a weird history of blowing that place up. It's not quite as, it's not going to be mentioned in the same breath as MSG or Dick's or SPAC or Great Woods or something like that. But they never really let down, and I always enjoy whatever they decide to do.
Well, before we wrap up, Bryan, first, thank you for everything. I love all the information you gave, the background, how you kind of explained your history, and we got to meld it together with Phish history. And I feel like I've been to Walnut Creek by your description, just by my history of going to, I guess, my version. I don't want to keep plugging Jones Beach, but that's just my life, my childhood. I feel like we have a lot of common ground, even though we're probably 1,000-ish miles apart.
For sure.
Do you have any last minute tips or tricks for anyone who wants to go to Walnut Creek? Anything that you would have wanted to say, but we just didn't get around to it?
Nothing outside of the normal dealing with 22,000 people sort of thing that you have to deal with these days. If you think you need getting there early enough, get there earlier. Be prepared for the weather, especially. I mean, for whatever reason, that place is a thunderstorm magnet, especially in the heat of the summer. Like this coming up show is going to be, it's screaming to me already. Afternoon thunderstorms.
Yeah,
it is definitely sort of like, if you've ever been to an amphitheater show, what you're getting into. For me, being from here and all the things that have happened there, and the way Phish treats that place definitely makes it slightly different and slightly more enjoyable for the attendance bias,
Perfect place to put a grace note on it. Thank you. Well done, Bryan. But genuinely, thank you for taking the time for writing out some notes just to make sure that you would be, you knew everything you wanted to say. I appreciate that 1,000,000 times over, that you came correct and that you're sharing just needed information with people who will need it. So, Bryan, thank you again for taking the time to speak with me and to speak to my listeners.
Thank you, man. It was an absolute joy.
And that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank Bryan Rodgers for joining me today, Phish.in for the multiple recordings used in today's episode, Phish.net for all of the information we needed, and the Mockingbird Foundation for everything they do to support children's music education. If you enjoy Attendance Bias, please support the show. You can leave a rating and a review of it on your favorite podcast app. You can follow Attendance Bias on social media, but please also visit www.buymeacoffee.com/attendancebias and donate anything you can. Thank you again so much for listening, and we'll see you next week on Attendance Bias.